And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, angels and demons and monsters and serpents. This is Brothers of the Serpent podcast, and we are coming to you not live from the 10 by 10 by 10 tangent cube of science, where we are nestled amongst the dusty bones of an ancient seabed high atop the Edwards Plateau. Once again, after 7 weeks in the Middle East, once again nestled amongst the dusty bones. Of course, there's a lot of dusty bones over there too. We were crawling around in some dusty bones.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. The pyramids are built out of millions of dusty bones from an ancient seabed.
That's true, yeah. I did it!
You did it. Well done. Well done.
I hope I did it.
You just need a robot over here doing that stuff.
Trying to use the new system.
Yeah. Trying to automate as much of this in the like recording the video for the podcast as much as possible, and maybe it's working.
I don't know. We're gonna roll with it.
Yeah. So I guess one thing we should talk about is, what did we learn that was new? Like, we visited Derenkuyu, Cappadocia. We hadn't visited those before. Derenkuyu, I thought it was really interesting. The top levels are really rough. Like haphazard, rough, but I mean, that whole area is just full of holes in the ground.
Yeah.
Like,
I think they said there were like 600 entrances or something.
Yeah. And I just mean, like, everywhere we were driving, there's just holes. People have been digging holes into that volcanic tuff for thousands of years.
Yeah.
So, it's a lot like the other ancient stuff we look at. You don't know what's really old, and what's a couple hundred years old, and what's 1,000 years old, and what's 4,000 years. You just don't know. But I did feel like when we got down to the bottom, well, it's not the bottom, the lowest level they would let us go to, they were the tunnels were much nicer.
The work was much finer. Now, that could be, I mean, you could think that maybe they got better. As they dug down and down.
Yeah. It wasn't just better, though. It was planning. It was architecturally beautiful. The stuff up high was just random.
Yeah, that's true.
There were just random holes cut through walls.
Like, used more recently was the idea.
Yeah, exactly. And it was like people were cutting things of convenience, whereas the lower levels looked planned out.
I don't like it. Switching too fast.
Is it?
Yeah. Anyways, it's annoying me. Stop switching so fast. I'm going to leave it here for a while.
Yeah, okay.
I'm going to do it with hotkeys.
Okay. That's fine.
It's just moving way too much.
Okay.
So I'm sorry to interrupt this whole thing, but
that's
just
right.
a little bit of inside baseball.
Inside baseball.
I programmed this switcher. We used it one time, and I was like, it's moving too much. And then we left for 7 weeks. And now I'm looking at it, and I don't know how I set this up. How do I fix it? So I'm just not going to fix it. I'll just do it manually. You're number one.
Don't go setting macros. You can't get it to pick the scenes you want it to use. I'm trying to get to the end. It switches too fast, but
I got you.
I couldn't think of the third line. Sorry.
Okay, back to what new stuff we learned.
Yeah. I thought the lower levels were well done and planned. It looked like those had been planned out by not like an architect, but somebody who was like, I want long tunnels with arches. It was tall and roomy. And they were at 90 degrees to each other. There was the what they called the cross, the church, whatever. I don't know why they called it a church. Just a cross-shaped tunnel section. But up above, it was, I don't know, it was like crawling around in an ant bed. Yeah. And but it's also just the tourist part. This is the thing. Like, we discussed this at the end of the tour. We discussed like the possibility of special permissions. Because one thing about, what makes the Egypt trip so special is the special permissions that we're able to get through the people that we work with over there, Yousef and Mo with Select Egypt. You know, the ability to get into places that you can't normally get into as a regular tourist. We need that in some places in Turkey.
Yeah.
There are other massive underground cities that aren't open to the public. That's what we want to see. You know, and then there's sections of Derenkuyu, like the other 75% of it, that isn't open to the public. So like in the Serapeum, there are grates and doors that close off stuff. And if you know the right people, you can get them to open the doors and you can go in there and you can see the stuff that most people can't see. And that's what I would like to do with some of that stuff in Cappadocia, because they're just running you through this tourist area. You know, you go in, you look at the upper area. They say, oh, look at this. This is where they had the animals. This is where they were making wine, which was bullshit. Kyle argued with our guide the whole time about wine making. He's like, no one's making wine down here. They're all going to die.
I could be wrong, but I was just like, dude.
CO2 is heavy. Yeah. It would fall to the lowest levels and kill everyone down there.
They were like, they built fires in the air shafts down below, and they would it would keep the air circulating. And Russ is like, yeah, but if it gets flooded with CO2,
it'll put the fire out.
And then you just have the bottom is just full of CO2, and it's not going anywhere, and you have to go down there. Who's going to go down there? You can't get.
Who's going to go fix it? Yeah,
it'd be a pile of freaking skeletons.
Yeah. Yeah.
They can age wine down there.
Right. So Kyle's point, he was just trying to tell the guy, like, they did not ferment wine in these tunnels. They did it on the surface, which takes a week, maybe less if it's hot. You bring it down in and then you age it in barrels down here, which is fine. But you cannot.
In terracotta jars.
But this guy was basically telling us this. Okay, he was great, right? I don't want to, the guide we had.
We can say he was.
Yeah, we can say he was a great guide. But he had his, like, his
spiel.
Yeah, he had his patented touristy spiel.
I mean, I'm sure that's what, if we looked it up right now, that's probably what they would say.
Yeah. I mean, they showed us multiple areas, and he's like, here's where they would make the wine, here's where they would, and we're just like, no. Anyway, it was fun to see that. Because with Yousef, if he's telling you something that's, and then you say, well, he's going to listen, and he's going to ask questions. And this guy was just like, they made wine. We can say. Anyway, it was cool, and I'm just saying I would like to see the rest of it. None of the Derenkuyu work was to the level of the stuff we see in Egypt, right? It looked like rough work, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We can say.
We can say. Yeah. But it was still fascinating, especially like, those lower levels. You're way down there. And when we had come down like to level 2 or maybe 3, I couldn't keep track. And then we got to look at one of the air shafts, which are the size of a old well, big around, at least the one that I was looking at. And you could poke your head in there and look up and see the little circle of light way up there, and then look down and there's this enormous, well going way down, and you could see light at the bottom because of the lower levels are lit up. And it's just a well, like a circular hole drilled through the rock all the way down there. And this is the story they were telling us, like, oh, they would build fires in the lower level, and that would pull air in, and it would rush up the shaft, and and keep air in the whole place circulating. Now, I don't know, again, that could work as long as you weren't drowning the fire in CO2. And then the other thing about it having like 600 openings to the surface, you're going to have good airflow, right?
But it doesn't seem, with that many openings, like it's a good
right
defense thing or whatever. Like that's what they were trying to say, is like, oh, they could defend. And
yes, the other big part of the story that they were telling us about Derenkuyu is how they were hiding from bad guys down here.
Hide from the bad guys.
Yeah, it was, here's where they kept their farm animals, here's where they made their wine, here's where they worshipped right? This was the church or the mosque. And here's how they hid from bad guys. That was the story. Every single room was about animals, wine, church, or bad guys, right? And like the bad guy story, the wine story, not working out. The bad guy story, definitely not working out, right? Like, I don't think anybody on the tour with us bought that part of the story. Because we're walking through and talking, and we would stop and he would tell us some stuff, and then we'd go, and people are like, like, are you? They thought they were hiding from armies down here. Like, can't you just pour boiling oil or, And he would say, oh yes, they'd roll the doors and close it off, and the bad guys can't get you. And it's like, no. Like, if you have to roll the door to block it from bad guys from getting in, you have maybe a day before they break through that door.
Yeah.
Because it's not hard rock.
Yeah.
And they have spears and swords. And
hammers.
Yes. It's the volcanic tuff in that area is very soft and easy to dig in, which is probably why there are these big, massive. It's interesting. It's structurally sound, right? That was one thing I noticed when we were going through. There are no cracks.
Mm-mm.
So you can dig all these tunnels all on top of each other, and you don't end up with, and there's no cracks already in the bedrock. There's not, it was like one giant homogeneous mass of volcanic material that fell down and then lithified.
Mm-hmm.
So there aren't these natural fractures that make mining dangerous, right? So they dug all these tunnels all through this stone because it's easy and it's structurally sound.
But
it's
still,
soft.
How are you? I just don't understand how you're doing this. Like, obviously they had to have PPE, personal protective equipment.
Yeah.
They had to be able to dig way down there and not die from the
dust
and all that shit. And then they I guess, how did they light it? Like, did they have torches? The torches would have sucked out the oxygen. Like, you had to keep an airflow.
Yeah.
Like, let's say that because they have this well, like, you could dig the well shaft first, right? But then when you start to try to tunnel from there, how are you getting airflow until you make another exit?
Yeah. These are good questions.
It's so strange how did you do this, like, without dying? Or, if your lighting source is torches.
Yeah, if your lighting source is fire.
I mean, it was obviously done. Like, this has been done a lot. Like, there's tunnels all over the place that were dug in antiquity. How did they do it? Like,
they're not that deep and they have big openings.
Yeah.
Most of the ones we go in, they're like a cellar, It's more like a basement than that place. Derenkuyu is something else.
Yeah.
But again, there's a bunch of these. So I don't know. I do think that they are old and they have been reused a bunch of times. I just don't know how old. But the idea that they're connected to this, that they're Varas, basically, because we have this story in Zoroastrianism about Varas. Like, Yima is told by Ahura Mazda to dig an underground city to escape a deadly cataclysm that's going to happen, but in this case it involves ice rather than water. So how old is that story? And are they talking about the same thing? I mean, is it talking about this kind of place? Now, we see this a lot with these ancient stories. I think it's like, it's telling us a story about something that happened to a lot of different people, but it compresses it into one guy talking to one god, whatever. You know what I mean? But it's really, this guy is more of a civilization or a big group of people. Like this concept we've talked about, like with Gilgamesh and Enkidu, maybe these are actually civilizations.
Right.
So is Yima, fair Yima, the favorite of Ahura Mazda might have actually been a large group of people.
Mm-hmm.
And Ahura Mazda is telling him, I want you to survive, and you're going to dig this, you're going to like make this place deep underground to survive this deadly cold. And you're gonna have to live down there a long time. So you gotta, and then he gives them all these rules. And he gives them technology to light the Vara.
That makes way more sense, just like surviving the cold. It's a great place to survive the cold.
Exactly.
And you can still go out and forage and do all the things you need to do, but you can close off the tunnels to keep the heat in or whatever, and use your air shafts and things for circulation or whatever. And you can bring the animals down to the upper levels, which, God, I can't even imagine.
Yeah, I know.
You need.
I was thinking about, the animals we have at the vineyard. We barely have to deal with them, and they're a huge pain in the ass. Can you imagine having them in tunnels with you?
I just don't want to be. And it's like you're living underneath them,
right?
And they're just golly.
Yeah. What? Like, how are you controlling where they shit and piss? You can't.
You can't. You'd have to have.
They need to be in a bowl.
Hands going in there and.
Yeah, he was telling us this story about
I guess they have hay and all this stuff they would pack in there or something, and then or maybe they packed snow on the ground or something. I don't know. How do you get the pee out?
Ugh.
It just seems horrible.
You bring in dirt and soak it, and then shovel it out of there. Yeah.
What we go into these pyramids and we get this extreme smell of
ammonia,
and it's like, oh, it's bats. It was the bats.
Yeah.
But then you're in this cave where they were like, oh, they kept cattle in here.
I don't think this was ever a stable, or if it was a long fucking time ago. Yeah, I agree with that. And then I also did notice in the upper levels that occasionally you'd see like a section of a wall that had a nice 90-degree, where the wall was, you could still see where they had chiseled it out or whatever, but it was flat. And to me, I was like, this is the remnant of the original room that somebody has come in and they're like, I want more room this way. And they just roughly gouge it out. And then somebody's like, I want, there's a room over there. And somebody's like, I just want to be able to get to that room faster. And they just cut a hole through the wall.
Yeah.
There was multiple sections like this where you could see, like, here's the original. This is why I thought when we got down to the lower levels, I was like, this is what it originally looked like. This kind of work. But in the upper levels, people just cut it for convenience because it was easy to cut. And this is, it's the same thing you see in the temples, in the Egyptian temples, where, for like Edfu was used as a stable for hundreds of years. And so there's all these places where, they were like hitching their animals to the blocks and dragging things around to use as troughs. And there were other places in Turkey we visited where you go in and you can see this was originally intended to be a burial place. They cut it out as a place to honor the dead, Ramazan was telling us, they bring the dead in here. They would do this long process of not mummification, but I don't know what you would call it.
Like interment or like
not embalming, but they bring them in, they wash them, they dress them in their finest clothes, all this kind of stuff, and then they would even, and then they leave them there to, it's a distant place, right? It's a hole in a cliffside, and they leave the body there to turn into bones.
Yeah.
Then they go collect the bones and bring them to the family crypt or whatever, or even it might just be below their floor. A lot of them stored the bones of their ancestors below the floor, but they let the body decay in like a rock cut place out more in the wilderness. But people since then have used them to feed animals. So the places where they laid the body, which was like it was a table, but it had it was trough shaped, I guess, because you would, this is disgusting, but you lay the body there and it would like the fluids would drain out, whatever. Well, people had like cut those out and they're bringing their animals in there and like feeding them in this. That's what Ramazan was telling me. He's like, yes, this was originally used for this purpose. Then people used it for animal husbandry. So it's like, now it's disgusting, The whole place is covered in this thick patina of like, just animal. You recognize that it was a stable. the floors are brown, black, the walls, everything is just nasty, and it smells like animals, right? Because it's much more recently used as this, whereas he said, at least, that when it was used for taking care of the dead, that they kept it very clean.
Mm-hmm.
You know, obviously it wouldn't smell good when the body was in there, but they would clean all this up because it was a place to return their loved ones to the sky, to the afterlife, to the earth, whatever, and then take their bones. And it was a sacred process. Whereas you're bringing your animals in there, they're shitting and pissing everywhere. So I don't know. I just thought that some of this in Derenkuyu at the upper levels reminded me of that, like the reuse and like it was a sacred place, or the rooms all had their purposes, but those purposes are completely lost because they've been reused and repurposed over and over multiple times throughout history.
I think the same thing's going on at Gobekli Tepe.
Yeah.
So this like one of the things that I've learned is kind of, I mean, it's along the same lines as the original hypothesis, which is that the PP&A people didn't make the megaliths. But I recently learned that they did, and I think one of our guys, Edfu Textulator, was like telling me about this paper where they were talking about the different wall structures coming in. And I went and looked at that in more detail. And it's crazy because what they're saying now is that the outer ring was like the first one that was built. And it's almost buried. When you're looking down at the site, it's that, you know, that the T-pillars that are like way out there on the outskirts, and they're just barely sticking out of the stuff. And then there's like your main enclosure circle of T-pillars. That outer ring was like the first rock walls. And there were T-pillars over there. And then they had some slope slide events. They had some dilapidation. And they built another wall inside that. And they just moved the T-pillars in. Yeah. Some of them, not all of them.
Right.
And then they built another wall, and so it's like this final ring structure that we're looking at is like the third iteration.
Yeah.
And they've moved pillars in, and they were broken, and they were stacking them up. They've got carbon dates from the three different the grout in the wall structure, or the mortar. And it's like 1,000 years apart.
Mm.
And they're saying like, they never actually completed these buildings. They're like, the buildings were never finished.
Because they weren't buildings.
They weren't building them.
Yeah.
They were trying to reuse them.
Yeah.
So that, of course, they never completed the buildings because they weren't the builders.
Yeah.
They were reconstructing it.
Yeah.
And the reconstruction never finished because there isn't ever a finishing of reconstruction.
Yeah. And they didn't have the same skill as the original guys.
So they say like, well, you know, when they're building the inner wall, why would they go and make a new T-pillar when they could just grab this one from out here and just move it in? They just grabbed the pillars that they wanted and moved them in.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, it's because they didn't make pillars. Like they weren't pillar makers.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
so
right.
It's just like, man, that's awesome. And they now have like, they can show you, like, there's these cool diagrams.
Or you can see like
color coded. Yeah.
I have seen those. Yeah.
And that's fascinating to me. The fact that like the start point of habitation is like the first reconstruction, and then 1,000 years later they're doing the third iteration of reconstruction, and they're still using the same freaking pillars that are already 1,000 years old by that time. They're not making new ones.
They're not making it. Yeah.
And perhaps it would be interesting. Perhaps that one giant pillar that's being carved out of Karahan Tepe is their attempt to cut out a pillar.
I was wondering about that too.
It's like, so you're like, really?
Yeah.
They're going to cut this massive, wonky, big, chunky thing out.
Yeah.
And they never finish. I don't know. I would really like to see some of those other quarry sites.
Yeah.
Because I saw some pictures of them like near Gobekli Tepe where there's like a really nice flat pillar cut out of but it's still laying there in the bedrock.
Yeah.
It's not this just massive sort of almost T-pillar shaped thing. You could see in Karahan where they kind of just wore the edge there, and you've got the little lip where it's supposed to be a T, but it's not.
Yeah,
it's barely.
It's not really. Yeah.
So I wonder about that they must have tried.
Mm.
And I think even in the PP&B period, they probably did make the small ones that are in their domiciles, right?
Yeah.
Like those are, but you're already now 1,000 years from, or so from the time that I think they discovered it. So I think that's really cool. And I just didn't realize the details about that, but that's awesome. The other thing I learned that I'm interested in is this Lion's Gate.
Yeah.
Dude.
Yeah.
Yousef made this one statement on the bus when we were in Turkey, because there was a lot of Lion's Gate stuff, like even in the in this circular enclosures, like at Cyberk, there's that rock cut area where there's the two lions and there's a guy standing in the middle.
Yeah.
And he's like, it's the Lion's Gate. And then we were in Cappadocia and there was that huge, on the King's Road, that giant thing. And there's the winged lions up there. And it's like, oh, it's the Lion's Gate. There was this whole thing about.
What was it called? Aslan. Aslan is the lion.
You're kidding me.
No. Yeah. Aslan something.
So that's like C.S. Lewis. That's where C.S. Lewis got.
I guess. I don't know. But it's, that the name of that, I should look it up. The name of that monument is Aslan something that means gate or door, lion's door.
The best thing that he said, though, Yousef, was on the bus when he was like talking about, or I think it was on the bus. Maybe he said it before and I just missed it. But this idea of the Sphinx, right? There's this whole idea that, well, there's two Sphinxes. There's two Sphinxes in the depictions. There's always two Sphinxes facing each other. And we're like, where's the other Sphinx? A lot of people have been asking, where's the other Sphinx? Is it possible that there's another one buried out there somewhere?
Aslan Kaya.
That's interesting. Huh.
The Lion's Rock.
Anyway, the idea that the other Sphinx is Leo.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. I didn't hear that.
So one of the things that, like in the apocryphal texts from, like the Christian tradition.
Yeah.
They talk about, like in the book of Enoch, he talks about going to the gates in the sky.
Mm.
And there's a lot of talk about these gates, these gateways, which you could interpret as the housing of the sun.
Mm.
So when the sun is housed inside one of the constellations, it's entering the gate. So I was just like, oh, that makes so much sense. Like the Sphinx is pointing east at Leo, and Leo is the other Sphinx.
And the two Sphinxes are shown.
And they're pointing at each other.
Yeah.
And there's the gate in the sky. I forgot the camera was right there. Stop doing that. There's the gate in the sky.
There you go. That was better.
And again, this mysterious gate, possibly in the Sphinx temple or whatever, or that was the gate that you went into.
If the temple was the pedestal, yeah.
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 But I just love that. I'm just like, oh my God, Lion's Gate. And then,
and
there's like a movie company called Lion's Gate. And I'm like,
yeah. Well, and Yousef also told us that the Lion's Gate story was, you have it was like yesterday and tomorrow. This concept of the.
Oh yeah, that's cool. Yes.
Right. And that so the person shown trying to approach the Lion's Gate is like, this is time. The concept is time. So then him and I had, because I kept bringing up Gilgamesh. I'm like, there's this famous depiction, and we see it in Mesoamerica, and in, I think it may be in South America. It's definitely in the Middle East. Gilgamesh famously holding the two lions, right?
Yeah.
The man with the two lions on either side. This is a common depiction of a godlike or demigod-like figure. And I was telling you,
Orion is also in some cases depicted holding a lion.
Right. But holding the two lions specifically. This is a specific imagery. And I was talking to Yousef about it. And then like the last conversation we had about it, I was like, dude, because he'd been saying that the lions are yesterday and tomorrow.
Mm.
and that is a representation of time. And I was like, Gilgamesh's quest was for immortality. So the depiction of him conquering the lions, he never achieved it, but this is him trying to get immortality. I have conquered yesterday and tomorrow.
That's cool.
Right. But it's interesting how that imagery is shown, like in more than just it's not just the Gilgamesh story. You see this person with the lions on either side. Sometimes he's holding them, whatever.
I think the Samson story is really important too, and it's, I think, in some cases a retelling. God, the Samson story, bro. Oh my gosh, it kills me.
Samson.
But just with the lion theme, he kills the lion first, right? He fights the lion.
Yeah.
And then he leaves, and then he comes back later.
Yeah.
And now there's honey.
Yeah.
The bees have built a nest in the carcass, and then he drinks of the honey. So it's the past and the future.
Oh, yeah.
So he does an action in the past, and it becomes fruitful, or
Yeah.
So
yeah.
There's like the same sort of theme.
And then he thinks he's a genius. He makes up the riddle. And
It's like, that is the worst riddle.
I've got the best riddle. He'll never get it.
But I love that because the riddle is so obscure that only the person who did it, who, you know what I'm saying? It's like an impossible riddle.
Yeah,
but it's almost like,
it's like Bilbo. What do I have in my pocket? Fuck you.
Yeah. But in a way, it shows that the mystery, like the mystery of it, is almost like unknown. It's like an unknown. It can be known by some, but it's not.
Yeah.
It's almost something you can't figure out just by thinking about it. You have to like walk the path, or something. But I love that. I'm going off on a tangent on this story now that I brought it up. But the connections to Samson and procession are just incredible. Like he has this whole planned life, essentially. It was already planned before he was born. And then it was the same situation with his mother, that it was like, Mary and Jesus. Like, she was visited by an angel and then told, right, you're going to give birth to this son.
Yep.
So there's this whole thing, like he has this almost like immaculate birth. She never cuts his hair. Eventually he has this downfall. Like his whole purpose was to destroy the Philistines, and then he ended up having the downfall. He was tricked by the woman, the harlot, whatever.
Jezebel? Was it Jezebel?
No,
that was a different one.
Delilah. Yeah,
that's it.
And so she cuts his hair. He loses his strength, and the Philistines, the civilization, like if you think about again, like these civilizations, the civilization takes him.
Yeah,
and they put him on the freaking stone mill.
Yeah, the mill.
And he's just grinding that mill around.
Yeah.
Well, they blind his eyes. So now he's blind and he's pushing the mill around. And it's like, okay, Hamlet's mill, here we go.
Yeah. It is.
He's grinding the grain and just biding his time. And eventually the whole, the elite have this giant party. They bring him in there and then he asks them to put it, he's tired. I'm tired. Put me between the two central pillars. So it's like, again, now you got the central pillars of the civilization and he's standing between them and he's blind and he's weak. And then he gets his strength back and he kills himself to take down the civilization. It's like the cycles of destruction and procession. And I don't know. It's just like, dang it, that story is rich. Like,
yeah, time is blind and grinds exceedingly fine, right? This concept of this like a chained... I think the depictions of the sun with the Aztecs and how they would show the sun as like personified, and then as the age gets longer, the sun gets old, right? So they're showing the fifth sun as aged, wrinkles, starving, tongue out. It's like bloodthirsty. I think it's something similar, like, and so Samson's weak, but he's still like, when his time is up, crunch, down goes your whole civilization because the age ends or whatever, that sun dies. I don't know, because of the stuff Randall talked about with bees, I start like that whole thing with the lion and the bees. I'm like, okay, now we got Leo and the moon, right?
I know. I know. Okay, there's honeycomb. And
Yeah,
the
there's
lion.
honeycomb
So
in
it's
the
when
lion.
Okay, so when the moon is in Leo. Wait.
No, the death of Leo results in people living on the moon.
There we go. The cataclysm results in people living on the moon. That's
exactly.
good. And there's honey on the moon.
Yeah.
So there's like gold and
Yeah, well, yes.
there's golden riches
Yeah.
on the inside the moon.
Yeah, because the people are living in the moon, it's full of honey.
Yes.
Yeah.
Last connection with the Samson thing, which is one of the things I was paying attention to a lot in Egypt, is the statues and the hair. So
Oh yeah, they have the long.
Yeah, so they have the what do you call it? The nimitz.
Oh yeah,
it's the thing with the stripes that comes off their head and it comes around like this.
Yeah,
and then but if you look on the back, it's tied into a ponytail.
Yeah,
and a lot of times on the statues it's short and it stops. But those stripes in it, like maybe it's bound up in a cloth that has the stripes. But maybe
because it also hangs down in front of the front too.
Yeah,
but then you see this thing going to the back. Yeah.
But then our buddy Momo from last year's tour was talking about how he thinks that the cricket bat that hangs between their legs is actually the bottom of the ponytail.
The ponytail, yeah.
And then there's like he was showing me all these depictions where they've got this thing looped around their belt, and he's like, that's the basically their hair is so long that they've got it. It's actually part of their garment.
Yeah.
They've got it tied onto the belt, and then it hangs down the back like a tail, like the jackal.
Mm.
And that's what really initially made me think of it, because I'm like, how do you get hair that long? Like, you never cut it.
Never cut it, yeah.
And then when you look, like all the gods, all the kings are depicted in this way with this, like potentially, if that's what the symbolism is like this ridiculously long hair.
Yeah.
And perhaps that's where the tradition came from, because like at Samson's time, or the time of the writing of that story, there was this tradition where people would go in, I can't remember what they're called, but they would go into this, it was almost like fasting, right? And they would not cut their hair. And there was a term for it, and I can't remember it off the top of my head right now, but people would do it for a certain amount of time, and then they would stop, and it was like a sort of a trial period for them or something like that. Whereas Samson, it was deemed he was going to be this before he was born. And he was this all of his life. And that's why he had his strength. So...
And a scene? Is that what you're talking about? No. What are
they called? Yeah.
The Essenes? Something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah.
So I was wondering, like, were the gods in ancient Egypt all like this? And this is where the whole tradition comes from. And this is why the later pharaohs are wearing this mock wig with all this stuff.
Nazarite.
Nazarite. Yeah, Nazarene.
Nazarene.
Nazarite.
Nazarite. Yeah.
What's the
definition? A Nazarite, meaning he was consecrated to God and following specific dietary and lifestyle rules, including not drinking wine, cutting his hair, or touching dead bodies.
That sounds like people that had to live in the forest.
I was going to say, yeah, this sounds like the instructions to... I
just wonder, man, does it give you superpowers?
And didn't Delilah get him drunk? She got him drunk and then cut his hair, so
that's the other weird thing. Like, the more you go into this story, like there was like 7 times she manipulated him to get the information, right? And then the first time he tells her, oh, well, if you tie me there, each one this tie me up with 7 twines of like these tiny little threads, right?
Yeah.
And I'll just be totally weak. I won't have lost my power.
Yeah, she's trying to get the secret of of his strength. Yeah.
And he goes to sleep, and then he wakes up and he's tied up with all these twines, and he's just like, because she'd call the Philistines in.
Yeah.
And he would just break them and kick their asses. And then she's like, you lied to me.
Yeah.
And never in the story does he say, you tricked me.
Right.
But he does this 7 times, and finally the last time she like really gets him.
Yeah.
Like, you don't really love me. Like, you're just lying. You don't really trust me.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, okay, let me tell you my real secret. Even though the 6 times before you turned me into the Philistines. So it's not, that's my point, is that it's purposeful. it's so obvious that she's going to trick him and betray him. But he tells her anyway. So it's telling you there's something else going on with that story.
Well, I think, I guess maybe I need to read it again. But I had the feeling that when I read it before, and I was much younger, obviously. I haven't read this whole Samson story in a long time, but I just got the idea that
he was really dumb.
He didn't care. Yeah. No, I think he didn't care. Yeah, you do kind of get the idea, like, bro, like, this is not a good woman, right? But he just didn't care. This is what makes him dumb on the whole thing. He's like, so what if she tricks him? He kicks all their asses every time.
Yeah.
Right? You know, so he's like, oh, you, oh, wow, you tied me up and brought in all these army guys, like, bam, 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 pow, right? And he's just like, whatever. He was so strong that he
just didn't care.
He didn't care.
The other thing is that there's the other part where he like kills 1,000 men with the jawbone of an ass or an ox or something.
Yeah.
And then the best one that I love thinking about when we're walking through these temples is that he carried the city gates away.
Oh yeah.
He goes in there and he carries them off on his back. And everybody's like, oh my God.
Yeah. And you're looking at
when you go into like Karnak or into these temples and you look at these gates, you're just like, what?
Yeah.
Like this is what a city gate is like.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I love thinking about Samson while I'm walking around in Egypt. And every time I go now, and thanks to Momo, who started this whole thing with the hair, I'm just like, dude. But it made me dive into that story a bit more, and I think it's pretty cool that somebody at that time was like passing on and encoding processional ideas and possibly much more ancient symbolism into this character, who in a lot of ways is like Gilgamesh or Enkidu in the stuff that he does, right? I don't know. It's cool.
The other thing we learned this time, and I want to go into more detail on this, and I know Ben is going to do it too, because like I remember we are all like, oh my God, Yousef has been telling us this multiple times every time we go about the head jet.
Yes.
And the statues. And it's that like the head jet for the unification of Egypt is a specific thing.
Bowling pin. Yeah.
It's a bowling pin with it's like the combination of upper and lower Egypt. And has been trying to tell us that the statues that are higher quality in general do not have that. Or if they do have it, it's because they added it later.
They cut the notch on the top, the little keystone where they could slide the extra piece on there to stack it on top.
Yeah.
The older statues just have the hair. They don't have the big hat.
Maybe that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. The hat on top is like the later edition, I'm pretty sure is what he was saying. Now, I could be misunderstanding it since Ben definitely misunderstood it for years. I just learned about it. So.
I think he's saying that that none of the older statues have the original unified head jet, Upper and Lower Egypt.
Yeah.
Which implies that they're older than the unification,
Gotcha. Okay,
which would put them pre-dynastic.
Yeah.
Now, some of them have been modified later to give them, the whole top of the statue was chopped off, and they put the unified head jet on there, but it's not of the same quality, right? And so he would point, look, this one, it just has the bowling pin. It doesn't have it's not the unified headdress. I think that's what he was trying to say.
Some of them will have the single bowling pin.
I
also think that's the hair. Actually,
it could be a big top knot.
The hair of it's a freaking top knot.
Yeah,
yeah.
It could be a big top knot. Yeah,
yeah.
It could also be. I mean,
so you bring it all up, and then you loop it back down, and then it comes down out the back, and then it goes down and it loops through your belt, and then it goes
really
down.
Long hair.
Cricket. That's what I'm saying. These dudes have been growing it for freaking 30,000 years or whatever.
They're all they're all Rapunzels or whatever. Let down your hair. I guess I don't know, how long is it possible for somebody to grow their actual hair?
Grok that shit. Let me see. There's got to be a Guinness Book of World Records.
Yeah.
Everybody has a different
That's what I'm saying. We don't want the world record. We want because I know once you get older, it won't really get that long anymore, right? It doesn't.
Probably. I mean,
but if you start as a kid and you just never cut it, or you only trim it or whatever, maybe it can get really, really long. I know there's people out there with extremely long hair. I just don't know. Can it be like 12 feet long? Maybe it can.
Let's see. Grok should know. Grok knows everything. Let's say, how old are we talking about? 40 years old? 30 years old? 40, maybe?
Yeah.
All right. Let's say 40.
I mean, based on the way those statues look, they're all 22.
Okay. That's a good point.
But those are,
let's say 30.
They're idealized, yeah.
30 years. I should have told it. Just give me the number.
No, did it give you a long explanation?
15 feet.
Okay. That's long enough to have to wrap it up in your belt and tie it up in a big top.
15 feet, bro. Yeah, and you just braid so it's like shortens it up. And then at the bottom, the cricket bat like gets wider, like they had to do this.
Yeah, or it's some kind of enclosure for the end of the hair.
Yeah, maybe.
I mean, like, you could decorate that hair with like bands and all, and then the very bottom you have some kind of thing you enclose it in, some sort of leather, whatever.
It's the first bits of the hair. That's the most important part.
That's the stuff you grew when you were 1. Yeah,
that's the innocent power down there. That's the key to your strength.
I don't know.
Anyway, I love thinking about the symbolism there. I don't know if this is like new, but just more Osiris Myth stuff. Like I've been diving into that a bit.
The comparisons of Osiris with other stuff.
Not only that, but just like looking into the variations on the myth itself, and then like as we go to these different sites, like what like obviously the Osirian, the burial place of the head of Osiris.
I missed the Osirian this time,
man. I was freaking not feeling good that day, actually. I was feeling all right in the morning. I was like, you know what? I'm good to go. And then by the end of the Osirian. By the end of the Osirian, I was just like, oh. Ugh.
Yeah. Yeah, this is the first time that we've done one of these where I got so sick that I couldn't go. I spent 36 hours in bed with fevers.
Good grief.
I came down, I knew, like, because we had the you got sick, and then we had Rel, Ben's wife.
Yep.
The day of the museums, like when we visit the Cairo Museum, the gym, the Cairo Museum, and then we're gonna fly at the end of that day to Luxor. We go to lunch that day, and she's shaking, and she's just like, ugh, and I'm like, oh man, she looks terrible or whatever. But I could feel it.
Yeah.
In here, and like you get the weakness.
Yeah.
I could feel the weakness going down my arms or whatever. And then when we were on the plane, I'm like, oh my God, I got, I don't know, high altitude. I got nailed by it. We landed in Luxor, and I knew, I was like, I'm going down, man down.
Man down.
Next morning, I got up and I'm like, I'm ready. And I went downstairs. I was like, I'm going to make an appearance at breakfast. I came down there like sweat pouring down my face or whatever, and Ben is just like, dude. Yousef saw me and he was like, no, stay home. And I'm like, okay, I will go back to bed. Yeah. And I miss the Osirian. Like one of my favorite places.
I tried to give a talk down there. I just was my heart wasn't in it.
Yeah,
it was so hard. I was like, yeah, they flattened this wall. I'd like to lay down. Yeah, it was cool. Obviously, it was really cool. I took some video of the other wall that we hardly ever look at.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing about that one is that, and we had seen this before, but it was much more complete.
Yeah.
And it had been completely flat. Now it's been destroyed. So like the top half of it is gone, and the whole ceiling is gone. So the other side, is more constructed, but less complete in the sense of at the time of the builders.
Yeah.
It's cool though that when they were doing the flattening, all the little alcove doors, like the little doors to these tiny little rooms or whatever, they left part of the flattening like protrudes out around the door. So the door's here, and then there's this thing that's like a half inch further out. So they flattened down. They were leaving this like relief around the door. Every one of them. And yeah, you're just like, damn, that's beautiful. Like the way they were planning to do this. And so on the other side, the guys were flattening, but they didn't get down to the level of the doorways yet. They were just working their way over the upper wall. Yeah. So you don't see any of that finer work. Yeah. That finer work that they would have flattened,
like leaving a relief around the door. They
were flattening the floor too, so they'd come down and then they'd curve off and flatten the floor. And there's places on the other side where the floor is all lumpy like this.
Yes.
They obviously flatten. It's like you got this giant stone. There's another stone sitting on it, so they flatten the part where they set the wall stone down on the floor tile.
Yeah,
but they left this bulk on top.
Yeah,
so they're like,
so that you can drop blocks.
Yeah, dude, they're flattening everything.
Yeah,
it's like not just the walls, dude.
Right?
They're like
the floors.
The entire process.
The walls are now, because we're in the areas where the floors have been flattened. The walls are actually standing on a little pedestal in the floor. Yeah. And there's places where the blocks have been shifted because of time or damage or whatever, and you can see this beautiful pedestal.
So they lay down a rough block. Let's say the first block. They lay down the first block, and then they flatten the area where they're about to lay down the next one on top of it. They flatten this side because they're going to put another block next to it. They only flatten what they need to get any mating faces together.
It seems crazy.
And then when they're done, they just come back and plane the whole thing, plane the whole room to the dimensions that you actually want.
Right, including the doorways.
Yeah,
I have been trying.
The doorways are cut up into the lintels.
I have been trying to figure out, like, why would you do it that way?
The other thing is those little rooms are so small that they have a stone. So you got a doorway here, you got this big lintel stone on top. And then you have this midway block. There's like 3 blocks that make up the side of the door.
Yeah.
The midway block spans the whole distance to the next door.
Yeah.
The room goes in, the doorway goes in and widens and then goes back and like this. So this block in the middle, it's like they put this giant block in there. Then they cut through and then they cut the room out of that block on the inside.
Yeah.
So it's this big block shaped like this, just like, oh my god, this is insane. It's wild as a building method, especially with that stone. It's I think it's quartzite, which is a hardened metamorphic sandstone.
It's
not basically
soft.
Quartz. It's
it's like a 7. It's
quartz
hardness.
The quartz grains are 7, but of course they're not held together as tightly as
a piece of quartz,
pure piece of quartz. So it's a little bit easier than just cutting into a 7. But it's basically the same as granite because granite's similar, and granite has quartz, but it also has some softer stones. And it's a matter of like, so it's basically the same. Like you're dealing with the same issue. It's wild that they would do that much removal after the fact. And it's like, there's no chisel marks. That's the other thing. It's so clear when you're looking at granite work that's been chiseled. Or a cave system. Like if we go down into the Osiris shaft, or you're like any of these tunnel systems in the Serapeum, in the limestone, you see all the little chisel marks of the way they were dealing with that limestone. You don't see it
even on the unfinished work.
That's what I mean. None.
I made that point a bunch of times. It's like, you can say here where they were flattening, well, there's chisel marks because this was the finished surface, and they're like, they're cleaning it up. But why aren't there chisel marks everywhere else? It's just, they're just not there, right? And they weren't using chisels. They just weren't. They were using the
granite
polonium
tool.
210 granite like lightsaber chisel. I love that idea. You just mount some, some highly radioactive, highly like fast decay radioactive stuff, and you just like,
So yeah, basically, if you had a tool like that, the complication would just be getting the materials out.
Yeah.
So you're like, I mean, that's your limitation. Your limitation isn't, well, how fast can we flatten this? It's how fast can we get the materials out of the way for the guy who's doing the flattening.
Yeah.
And that makes a little bit more sense. Like, it seems like the amount of stone they were willing to build in place that was then going to be removed is so ridiculous.
Yeah.
That they must have.
And with that ablation, you actually don't have to. So with chisels, what we expect, or with, if you're cutting, what we expect is you got all this extra stone and you're removing. And so you end up with this stuff falling down, big chunks, maybe, even though you're kind of going through here and you get this big piece that falls off or whatever, however you would do it. Maybe you're working down the front, so you end up with all this gravel and dust. But Max was basically saying that it's just an ablation process. It turns the stuff into gas and dust. So you actually,
you work the surface.
Yeah.
You don't cut off a piece. You work the surface because it vaporizes
it.
That's right.
Yeah.
I remember that.
Yeah, it's ablative. I wonder what it would sound like. Yeah. Yeah, maybe that is what it sounded like.
They whistled the stones into place, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's wild. And you can see in the temples, of course, they're doing the same methods. Like they were, I think, the temple.
Yeah, with the sandstone.
The temples, they were still utilizing this same sort of process.
Yeah.
Like step 1, bulky block.
Yeah.
Step 2, flatten it.
Yeah.
Right? Like that sort of process.
Yeah.
But it was obviously a much softer stone and much later time period. Like the time periods. Well, I don't know. I guess that would be the alternative history thing. Because in the standard model, the idea is that the Osirian is the same age as the Seti the First temple. Yeah. But, the older archaeologists that were originally looking at it were like, this is old.
Yeah.
This is so it's just a new.
They were saying Old Kingdom, but much older than Seti the First. The older archaeologists were like, this looks like the Valley Temple.
So one of the points that I was thinking about was regarding that situation with the Temple of Seti the First and the Osirian is that as the builders of the temple, which the temple is amazing, like that temple is just amazing. The carving, like the artisan work. The artists were incredibly talented. They used really high quality materials. They did like high quality limestone, high relief or bas relief carvings. So it's really well done. These are like incredibly talented people. And you can imagine like these guys going to dig the foundations and they had to have known it was there. Like I'm not sure I buy the story that they're like.
It's aligned with it.
It is in the same alignment, which is not north to south. It's tilted.
Like some weird.
It's almost 45 degrees.
Yeah.
So, but this L shape is strange, right? And it's almost like the temple is bowing to the older.
Yeah, that's a great point.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It's like this was not like, we were building temple and we're still digging the foundations. You don't do that.
Yeah.
No engineer.
Yeah.
I don't care, ancient or modern.
Yeah.
Would say like, well, we'll just dig the foundation over here and then we'll work our way that way with knowing nothing about the ground over there.
Yeah.
I mean, how do they know the bedrock?
I made that mistake in some building games. Don't do it. Build the whole front of your house before you have the whole ground plan planned out. Don't do it. Don't do it.
You did it. These guys didn't make that mistake.
No, they didn't.
Because they were obviously skilled. They were so skilled.
Yeah.
That temple is amazing. That's my point.
Yeah.
Right? The temple is really amazing. They would have had the entire area plotted and excavated. I'm assuming they would have excavated down to bedrock. They needed to anchor the structure to the bedrock. So they would have found out that, like, oh shit, the bedrock goes down here, because clearly that was a very ancient floodplain, because it's filled with Nile sediments.
Yeah.
So they're not like the temple. How deep is the temple bedrock? It's not that far down.
I don't think the temple goes to the bedrock.
No? It's sitting on the Nile sediments?
Yeah.
Huh? Okay.
This is the interesting thing. Like,
I would like to find that out.
I would like to find this out too, because the whole concept of the Osirian being a well, it's going way down, right? Because the whole place is in a valley. The valley is full of sediments and sand. So the Osirian has been dug far down into the sediments and sand to actually get to the spring down in the bedrock. Excuse me. Sorry. And remember that there's supposed to be a channel that goes to the Nile from the Osirian, and it runs under the temple. Right? So the temple is built on top of that. And I don't think that whole thing is... This is what I'm not sure of. I don't think that that's supposed to be structure from the bedrock all the way to the temple floor, because the temple is actually built in the valley. Right? The Osirian's here. It's a big, deep 30 meters down before it gets to the bedrock or whatever.
That's insane.
That temple does not have 30 meters of structure.
No.
They just put... They flattened it. So they got to some harder sediments.
Yeah, so like modern engineers will say, like, well,
you need pylons.
You need to dig down. You need to dig down until you've reached like undisturbed ground, and then from there you can build a pad back up. So maybe they tiled on top.
Yeah,
that's amazing. I didn't realize that, but it is possible too, because the you can see the varying heights of cliffs and stuff at the edge of the Nile Valley. So the entire Nile Valley, like the bedrock used to be 1,000 feet above our heads when we're standing at the temple.
Yeah.
It's been carved out. So there's going to be steps. And I mean, some of the cliff walls on the edge of that thing are enormous. So it's possible that the temple is literally built on bedrock, but then the bedrock drops off like hundreds of feet. I don't know.
So,
but if you're saying there was a channel dug, then it's probably they weren't digging it through. I mean, I guess they did. They dug channels in bedrock. I don't know. It'd be great to find that out.
The valley goes towards the Nile, right? So if you're, where's the camera? Okay, so if you're looking at the Nile, and I'm pretty sure I'm getting this right, but basically the Nile is here, and the first temple in the Osirian is facing it, like this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the valley is actually running in this direction towards the Nile. So the walls of the valley are this way.
It could still have step downs though, because it's a tributary. Like we see that, right? With a tributary, it'll have...
Right, but the steps down are towards the set. It's going down in the direction of Seti from the Osirian. You see what I mean?
Okay. You're right.
If it's stepping down, the temple is actually farther from the bedrock than because it's going towards the Nile in that direction. I'm pretty sure that's correct. I might be wrong, but I've looked at this on Google Earth a bunch, and
that's really cool. No, I didn't. I hadn't considered that they would have.
But it's possible that they put, like one thing that engineers will tell you now, if you're going to build a really massive structure, and like in Florida, for example, you just have to put in massive pylons that go way down into the sand.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's all there is. And it doesn't always work, right? You see the buildings are...
I like the friction pylons. I love that one. They drill a hole and they make a tapered pylon.
Oh, and then just drive it
and
in.
they stick it down in there, and then they have this thing, and it's like banging out, just boom, boom, just driving this pylon, and they measure every hammer.
Oh,
and when it stops moving by a certain amount, each hammer, like the engineers will say, like when it doesn't move any more than this amount each time the hammer hits, you're good.
You've hammered it in far enough. Yeah,
that's friggin' cool.
Yeah.
I doubt they were doing that with these temples, but I can totally see where they would have stripped away loose sediments down to like a hard pan and then tiled and tiled and tiled on it. But it's insane to imagine that thousands of years later, that thing isn't just
right.
Wow. How like?
But when you walk around on the floor, it's wavy. Right?
That's true. But man, I need to look at that temple in more detail. The walls don't seem to be doing that. Yes, there's some cracks in the walls and things, but I mean,
you're right. It's in pretty good condition. It's in really good condition.
It's in amazing condition.
Yeah, the roof is all there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's...
Well, there was a second story. It's mostly gone.
Yeah, well, that's true.
Because isn't that true? I'm pretty sure there's...
I think so, yeah. Yeah. Or at least structures on the roof. I don't know about a full second story, but yeah.
I love the fact that we're just winging all this stuff and we haven't actually researched it. Classic.
Yeah.
Well, that's really interesting. I also want to see some.
Now, I will say that this channel going to the Nile is practically mythical. Okay, this is a Herodotus, you know, but I mean, Herodotus he's basically writing down what he was told. And a lot of times people are like, that's complete bullshit. And then later somebody's like, wow, look, we found out that Herodotus was exactly correct on this.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'll have to rethink this because I was thinking like they're digging down to bedrock or whatever. And that was kind of like the thesis was that they had to have known the Osirian was there. If they weren't digging to bedrock and they're just prepping the sediment and tiling on it, then perhaps they didn't know it was there.
It's aligned with it though.
It is.
I think there were structures that the Osirian had upper levels higher than what we can see, that those stuck above the sand. And it might have been a pile. It might have been a tell, just a pile of blocks covered in sand, but they knew something was there. And I think they came in and cleared around it and discovered, you know, they discovered probably a far more intact structure. I mean, that's almost certainly a far more intact structure than what we see now. The part of it that was intended to be above ground was destroyed, but they dug around it and cleared out the granite blocks or whatever and found the roof of the place that we go to now. And they got in somehow. They got into it. Maybe it had holes or whatever. They got in because they drew on it. Mm-hmm. They drew on the walls.
They carved all over it. That's what I was going to say. They carved on that wall. They carved into some of the granite hieroglyphs and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing.
However, what's interesting before you go on, they may not have found that until the very end. You know, I just don't know because part of the temple actually extends over some of the underground stuff of the Osirian in a like not a very structurally sound way, in a weird way. So maybe it was planned out. I don't know, but some of it does look like accidental. You know, the question is about the alignment for me. Why is the Temple of Seti, the long part of the L shape, exactly in the same line as the Osirian itself? Number one, why is the Osirian in that line, that angle? What is this? What is the purpose of that angle? Is it just facing down the valley? Maybe that's why.
The other thing that's really missing from this, at least I admit I haven't done the research to find out if there were, actually at the time this was excavated, there was no way they would be able to do the types of testing on the sediment that we can do today.
Yeah.
But the thing that's missing is that if you're going to excavate the site, you should be able to find that the strata of the Nile sediments have been disturbed, right, in antiquity. So the thing I asked one of the archaeologists there was like, have they dated this strata? And he's like, oh, it's extremely old. So in other words, like the strata layers that were excavated in order to reveal the Osirian are incredibly old.
Yeah.
Meaning the Osirian was dug through that strata in order to build it.
Yeah.
But it would have been interesting to have like good data on like all of the layers of sediment, what was excavated and what was not, because surely there was some sedimentation after it was built. But that was excavated in the 1800s or whatever with Petrie and other people. And so we've lost.
And it was excavated by SETI's engineers, right?
That's true. Maybe not all of it.
No, yeah, probably not nearly as much, but they got it. They clearly got into the part that we can walk around in. Yeah. And Herodotus claims that he was brought all the way down to the bottom and shown the source of the water.
Yeah.
Right? So Herodotus is much later than SETI's time.
That's true. Okay.
So
I still
apparently the ancient Egyptians, all the way up to the period where they were interacting with the Greeks, had access to most of that structure. It wasn't until apparently, I mean, I'm guessing, but it wasn't until the fall of the entire Egyptian empire, and then the encroachment of later peoples, where all the quarrying was taking place. Like the quarrying is not the Egyptians. They had it connected to a temple, and they're bringing Herodotus in there, and it was roofed over, and he talks about it. So in the time of the Greeks, he's basically saying the structure is basically intact, the Osirian part. So
now the enclosure, or at least the excavation area, is enormous, right? Where the archaeologists have like excavated this giant square around the area.
Yeah.
Now, if that was done in Petrie's time, because I know he had to move all these materials that were previously excavated in order to reveal the temple.
Yeah.
They were all put on the Osirian. And then when he figures out, like, oh my gosh, like there's this structure down here, like he's like looking at this. First, I have to move this massive pile of refuse from the entire excavation of the temple off in order to get down to the Osirian.
To excavate
the Osirian.
The Osirian, yeah.
So that's what I'm talking about. It's like, yes, those Nile sediments filled in that area, but even in ancient times when SETI excavated it, did they excavate out
all the way
out to the origins of the edges of the foundations of the thing, or did they just uncover the roof and get access into it and build around it? You see what I'm saying? That whole the exterior walls and all of that stuff was excavated in Petrie's day, and the data from that excavation is forever lost.
Yeah.
Like we won't know the details from that strata. It's just gone. And that sucks.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. Because it's possible that some of the stuff that Petrie excavated has been there since the builders.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah. That's because the ancient Egyptians probably didn't dig the entire thing out. They just got access to the interior. Right? So that they could draw on it.
It's possible they did that.
Greater scribblers.
Greater and lesser scribblers. Yeah, I mean, it's possible. It's just, we just won't, that's the data that's missing. It's just going to be, it's gone forever.
Yeah.
It sucks. But it would be
the other thing I'm not clear on is how it's connected. Is there supposed to be a passage from the temple that actually goes into the Osirian? No. There's a passage that leads out of the temple, and it has the pyramid. Sorry, not the pyramid text. The King's List on it, which is like that's phenomenal. You know, the first couple of names on there, they're so old. It's just I was asking Yousef like, what is this, and what did he say? He was basically saying that the name is basically like first ones or whatever.
The first. I've since I think Jason showed me something after that was like, no, this actually is a king's name. I can't remember.
Menes.
But
like
I think
the first unification guy.
Yeah, I think what Yousef was saying was that one of the, I can't remember exactly.
Okay.
I don't want to
misquote
mess this up, but what I remember is that it was like what you're saying, like the first ones or whatever, or like suggesting that it was opening the door for like much earlier, all the kings before.
Right. Anyway,
but then Jason was like, I don't know, bro. And then he sent me something about it, and it was like, well, shit.
Looks like Menace.
I can't read hieroglyphs. So just...
Anyway, I need to read more about how exactly it is that they think that the two structures are connected, because they aren't, as far, at least nothing that I've seen. There's the whole touristy entry tunnel, right? And then there's the exit tunnel from the temple that points towards the Osirian, but there's no actual structural connection that I could find. Nothing from the Osirian.
Would have come out of the temple, out of the king's list, and you would have been walking on the roof of that thing.
Way above the roof.
Yeah. Yeah.
Way above the roof that we see now. Maybe if there was more
structure on top.
Yeah. But I mean, if you filled in that hole, there would be nothing sticking above it, and it would be many, many meters below the surface. And if you came out of the King's List tunnel, there would just be sand. I mean, shit, there would be nothing to tell you the Osirian was there. So I want to know, like, why do they think they're connected? Is it just because they're close to each other?
They're aligned. And...
yeah.
I mean, I that's what I'm saying. I think that the build, like SETI's builders,
they knew it was there. Yeah.
The
alignment is the key.
I think they put their temple there because it was there. I like the idea of like the temple is bowing to the head of Osiris idea.
That is cool.
But I think the design of the temple was purposefully and originally made that way because they had found this ancient thing and they were
doesn't the temple like tell Osiris's story too? I mean, it's got the whole it's all, yes, of course, it tells it tells a little bit about Seti. Like it's talking about, like, Seti's always like he's the king. Here's Seti
Osiris
doing Osiris
stuff. Is doing all the stuff, and then their position switch, and then of course Isis is there and all that kind of stuff. And then of course Ramses II comes in and he carves out the first entire hypostyle hall. And puts his own story into it. You know, into his father's.
But it's basically an Osirian temple, right?
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. And I love, this is why one of the reasons
they're like,
why
wow, Osiris's head was in here.
Or it was the water.
Yeah.
Right? Like that was his head. The head water is like the head. You know what I'm saying?
Oh,
this, I don't know.
The spring is the well, I mean, yeah. I don't know. I start thinking of Ea and fertility gods and water coming out, irrigation. It's like, okay, so you have the head of Osiris. It's a well, right?
Yeah.
And then so way later, even if we say, okay, let's just say the Osirian is Old Kingdom. It looks like the Valley Temple. If we say the Valley Temple is an Old Kingdom structure, 4th dynasty.
That's another one of the Osiris pieces.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Like, that's why I've been looking into that myth.
So let's say the Osirian is 4th dynasty. Now Seti comes along way later, like 1,000 years after that. But he still knows what this is supposed to be, and he builds this massive temple that bows to this ancient resting place of a body part of Osiris and makes the entire temple basically dedicated to him and Osiris doing cool stuff.
Yeah. Me and Osiris are bros.
Yeah, exactly. And then Ramses comes in and he's like, I'm also bros with Osiris.
Actually, like, I was his first bro. So, like, the first hypostyle hall is all me, bro. I'm not like one of the little
Even though Seti's his dad, he's like, I'm Osiris's best bro.
But I love this idea. This is the idea. Okay, so the story goes that Osiris and Set have this. Well, Set, Osiris's brother, wants to destroy him or take over, and he builds a box.
Yeah,
a coffer, And then he's like, he measured Osiris's body. He knew like exactly how big Osiris was, and he's like, let's.
He had him lay down on a Tempur-Pedic mattress.
I'll have this big party. Yeah, I'll have this big party. I'll invite all the greats and everybody, and we're all hanging out. And I've got this beautiful coffer that I've made, and I'm offering it as a gift to anyone who can fit in it. And everybody tries, and no one fits, and no one fits. And finally, he's like, "Hey, bro, you should try laying in this box." And then he goes and he lays in it, and he fits perfectly. And Set's like, slams the lid shut, throws him in the Nile, and he floats off. And then Set can take over.
Yeah.
This coffer eventually, like, in one story, it lands on the shore somewhere, and then it grows up in this tree.
Yeah,
it's grown into a giant tree, and then this king cuts down the tree and then goes and puts it in their palace or something like that. Like you put the wood in the palace, and Isis is on this search. Isis, Osiris's wife, is like trying to find him, and she eventually finds out that like, oh, he's in this distant land, and his body is in this tree, and she goes and like makes herself known to the wife of the king, the queen or whatever, and she eventually agrees. Yeah, you can take him back. So that's one story. That she gets him back, and then like Set freaks out, right, when she finds out she's got him, and then I think he in that story chops him up into pieces, right?
Yeah.
The other story is a little more simplified, where he closes him in the box and he chops the box into 14 pieces and scatters them all over Egypt.
Yeah.
So that's like the simplified version. And Isis goes around searching for all the pieces, and she finds everything but the phallus.
Yeah.
And so she can't procreate. She's trying to have a child with him, and she can't do it because she can't find the phallus. But she has all these magical powers. She finds all of his pieces. And in one story, she builds a shrine where each piece...
Yeah, where she discovered each piece, she builds
a shrine, a monument to it. Eventually, having never found the phallus, she uses some magic and completes him, and then is able to conceive. And then they have Horus, their son, who then goes on to fight Set and all this kind of stuff later. But Osiris becomes like, the god of the dead, but he's also the resurrection. He was resurrected. So there's this whole
and I mean the flood is even roped in there. Like if you like the Egyptian guy who told us the story where like when Isis is looking for the pieces and she can't find them, she's crying.
Yeah,
she keeps crying, and like all the animals and everybody is begging her to stop crying
because she's flooding the
Nile. Because the whole land is flooding and it's killing everything. And she's like, I can't find the phallus, and she continues to cry because she can't have a child with him. And it's like it's causing destruction everywhere because she's just weeping. Yeah. So they roped the flood into the story.
They put everything in there.
But like that might give it a timeline.
This is what I'm saying. This one of the things that's interesting about this myth is that it's the oldest, one of the oldest stories that's basically venerated by the people of Egypt. And eventually it goes out of favor, and some new king or some rebel or whoever it is like puts in these other gods, right? Okay, well this god is good. This is the new name.
Yeah.
And this is what he does, or this is his aspect and all this kind of stuff. And after a while, that character, that god, like slowly changes his story to being more like Osiris, and then eventually they name him Osiris again.
Yeah.
And it happens over and over and over. For
the
thousands of years.
The Osirian archetype is so strong.
Yes.
That they're like, no. Let's make a new guy. And then he slowly becomes Osiris.
He basically becomes Osiris again. And it happens over thousands of years. And it's the longest running myth that was basically a part of a civilization's foundational myth ever. And I think that there's pretty good reason to believe that it's still actually happening. And we right now are in a phase where the god's name has changed.
Yeah.
And his aspect a little bit has changed. And eventually I would just base on thousands and thousands of years of
Eventually
history that it's going to go back to Osiris. Why will it go back to Osiris? Why did it go back to him over and over again? It's weird. So I'm really intrigued by this idea that, number one, we can maybe find more out about what it really means, because it is a story like personified. There's all these deities doing all this stuff. And the way we kind of look at myths, where maybe a character is a civilization, or maybe a character represents this aspect of physics or something like that. I love this idea. And if the story about her setting up these shrines to the various body parts has to do with actual locations in Egypt or around the area, that the Osirian, being the head, is one of the shrines that she built. She, being a civilization, being a mother civilization of, she overcame an evil, catastrophic force. She had a child. The child, Horus, is like the next generation of that civilization that then goes and finally, ultimately defeats the power that destroyed them in the first place.
Yeah. The child Horus is the result of her being a civilization, finding the remnants of this other ancient civilization, and then combining herself and it to make a new civilization. Yeah.
God, it's
and then you have Set, who is the civilization who wants to destroy this other one.
Yeah.
So this is, I mean,
and then so then when you look at the temples, like the Temple of Hathor, the ceiling in the first hypostyle hall has that whole that massive relief up there that is basically telling the Osiris myth. It starts out, it's got Isis and Nephthys, her sister, with Osiris and Horus, and they're on a boat, and then underneath the boat are all of Horus's sons. I think there's 8 of them, and they're like carrying this boat, and then there's like this stairway of 14 stairs going up.
All the pieces.
The white staircase.
Yeah.
Going up, and at the top is the mirror on a stand. It's like that iconic mirror that they have on a stand, and it's this white disc, and in the middle is the eye of Horus, right? The just classic Egyptian eye.
Yeah.
And that eye of Horus is like part of another bit of the myth of Horus. It gets his eye gouged out by Set. And so there's this whole lunar connotation to the story, that Horus is in some ways the moon. He represents either both the moon's, the new moon, where he loses his eye for a moment, and then also the eclipse, where the sun god loses his eye for a moment. And then there's the rebirth. So you've got the lunar, like the bites taken out of the moon over 14 days, and then it goes dark, and Horus loses his eye. And then over 14 days, the moon comes back in pieces and pieces, and eventually it's whole again. That's the story of Isis renewing it. So Osiris is the moon. Horus is also the moon. Like they represent. So there's this whole.
It's celestial.
It's freaking awesome. It's so cool, and it's like the more I go into the story, it's like the symbolism is very rich. And it represents all this astronomical stuff.
And remember the people of Haran, so that now we're tying this back to stuff we were looking at in Turkey. The people of Haran, the people who may have built Haran, were, what was their name? Possibly people of the book, right? That they are mentioned in the Quran as being a third kind of person of the book. And so they were... And they traveled to Egypt to visit the Sphinx. And they did this many times. Trying to remember their name.
They made the pilgrimage.
Yeah. They also traveled to Sogmatar.
Oh my gosh.
They traveled to, and they were probably visiting places. But remember that they were most likely Hermeticists. Their book, right, was like the Hermetica, the book of Hermes. They were followers of
Eblaites. No. Sorry. Keep
it's okay.
going. Just don't look it up. Screw the name.
They they traveled to Egypt over many generations to venerate the Sphinx and Giza, basically. Yousef talked about this many times. And like they would travel there to visit the Sphinx. They also went to Sagmatar. They possibly built or responsible for the oldest parts of Haran and the formation of the university there. They were considered people of the book. They were astronomers. They were followers of Hermes Trismegistus, who is also Thoth, the god of knowledge, right? They were visiting places they thought were vaults of Hermes. Yes. Lost places of knowledge. But they were also worshippers of sin. This sin, the Osirian.
What are you saying, bro?
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
The sin, the god, the Osirian name of this god is probably Horus. He's a moon god.
Yes.
Again, so you have Thoth, Horus, Sin, and then these people, if I could remember their name, they're very mysterious. No one knows exactly who they were, but it's because they're like a Quranic mystery, right? But people are guessing. Let me see if I can figure this out.
Okay,
we should take a break because I need to
blow your nose.
Yes, let's take a break.
Fine.
Real quick.
Okay, let's do that. Let me see if I can.
Can't you just hit pause right there?
Oh yeah,
and then we'll just come back.
Genius.
Yeah, there we go.
All right, we're back.
We're back.
It's been a little while.
That was a good break. The Sabians,
yes,
is who I was trying to talk about. That they were people of the book. They were Hermeticists, probably, followers of Hermes, and they seem to have made pilgrimages to places that they thought were associated with Hermes or vaults of Hermes. This is the myth or the idea, and they went to the Sphinx, which is, famously supposed to be connected to, Edgar Cayce said it had what do they call it? A hall of records beneath the Sphinx. Sagmatar also is supposed to be associated with star worship and Hermeticism, and they journeyed there as well. And then Nimrut.
Sagmatar is in Turkey.
Yeah. And Nimrut is out there, Nimrut Dagi as well. And now I don't know if the Sabians ever traveled there, but if there's any place that could be a vault of Hermes, it's that place.
No kidding.
Yeah. And we do know that there is chambers beneath that massive tumulus, which is a gigantic pile of large gravel on top of the mountain. And it has never been...
God, and some king shows up later and just builds these gigantic stone thrones up there with all these different guys and the eagle and then there's the Lion's Gate.
Yeah, the Lion's Gate
up there.
It has a pyramid structure. Now that
From
was
basalt.
Built out of basalt. There's a whole, what would you call it? Like some kind of mural or a frieze, like a carved stone.
Yeah, they built a wall they stood up these.
Yeah. Crazy interlocking, strange, wild looking
H block
things. They stood up and then they carved this whole story out of one side. But yeah, the king Antiochus was associating himself with this place. And it's you got the Phrygian caps on them, and then you see these. It's this
the Phrygian caps, bro, are the they're the hair bowling pin hat that have just gotten
it's kind of drooped down. That guy, the guy in the Phrygian Valley who showed us where the cart ruts were, was wearing one.
Yeah,
he had a red, droopy cap on.
It droops over the front. It comes up and then
he's wearing a Phrygian cap.
Yeah.
But the statues on Nimrut are this weird mix of Persian, Greek. It's there's Zeus there, but and then you have the eagles and the lions.
Yeah.
So this connection with Horus and Osiris and Isis and Sin and the Sabians and Hermes and Thoth is what I'm fascinated with. So this the kind of this and the Lion's Gate and Gilgamesh, the way we were digging into this past trip. one of the things that was really great this time is that, like, we had Yousef with us the whole time.
Oh man, that was awesome.
So before, when we've done these Egypt trips, we, you know, when we're in Egypt, Yousef is there, but we're all working. And so we go out onto the sites and Yousef is talking to the attendees. And when we're talking to the attendees, but there's not a lot of time where Kyle and Ben and Yousef and I can stand around and have a discussion with each other about something. It's usually Yousef is teaching everyone, right? And like, we're letting them ask him questions because they're attendees paying to be there. That's what they want, or they're asking us questions, whatever. But this time, we had a lot more time with Yousef just to hang out, you know, because we did the extension, and we had attendees there with us. But then once everyone left the extension, we had a few more days in Sharm el Sheikh, and we were just hanging out with Yousef, and we had some deep, long conversations then. And then we go to Dahab, we went to Alexandria, back to Cairo, and then to Turkey. And then the whole time we're just, you know, we're like, we were getting into these mythological discussions.
Yeah.
And Yousef was involved, and it was just great. Because, like, you know, taking him through Turkey, right? And we're looking at these ancient sites.
Cool.
Yeah.
Seeing him,
and then, like, he's like, what is this place called? Right? And then he would say, well, this is a word in Egyptian, right?
Yeah,
and
yeah.
he would name it, like, here's this ancient word. And like and then he was making the connection with the Sabians too. He was like, these people would come to visit, these people that you're saying built Haran would come to see the Sphinx. And he told the whole story. And you and Yousef also made this connection with the Lithics, right? I was going
to bring up the Lithics, because that was the other crazy connection. I never realized this, but at Gobekli Tepe and Karahan Tepe, at the lowest layers, when they excavate, they find all these lithics, which we've talked about many times, these arrowheads, these flint tools, and the tools are named based on the first places that they were they were defined, the style of the making. There's Byblos points, there's Aswad type points, there's all these different kinds, and Helwan.
Yeah, Helwan.
And I was telling him, like, oh yeah, these are like Helwan. He's like, Helwan?
Yeah,
that's in Cairo. I'm like, what? And I was like, there's probably a place in Turkey called Helwan. No. It's in Cairo. It's a small little area of Cairo. Now, Cairo is taken over, like Cairo has grown to encompass this place called Helwan, but it's right in front of the Giza Plateau.
Yeah.
Helwan is literally in front of the pyramids. And
so it's like it was a village or something. Like,
yeah, it's very, very ancient. Yeah. So the points, I don't know how old the name Helwan is.
Yeah.
But the lithic types were first identified there, and they called them Helwan, just like we have Frio points because they were discovered.
Kervil knives.
Kervil. They were discovered in Frio or in Kervil.
Yeah.
Over there, they first identified this lithic type and its date, its age, in Helwan, right in front of the Giza Plateau where the pyramids were.
And it's associated with PPNA people.
They found them at the lowest layers of Gobekli Tepe. Yeah. Helwan points.
Yeah.
So these people, and you know what? This is not crazy because we see the same thing. It's the same thing happened here. Like the Clovis point was found originally identified in Clovis, New Mexico, and now they're found all over, right? Clovis points. Because these people they freaking went everywhere and they traded and their technology spread, the style of tool making spread. That was their tech. So the people that were at the lowest beginning layers, the first occupiers, quote unquote, of Gobekli Tepe, were making Helwan points along with other types. So they had a connection with Giza.
Yeah, and that is important.
Direct connection.
Yeah. Remember the infamous clash with Zahi, and about when he's asked about Gobekli Tepe, and he's like, "What is this? What are we talking? Is this in Egypt?" Like, I'm sorry, they found Helwan points there.
That's just
I don't know. I think that's important.
Absolutely.
Like this dismissal, because it was a discussion about the age of the Sphinx and all this kind of stuff, and this dismissal, like, show me the potsherds kind of deal. Like, well, in Gobekli Tepe, at least all the way back to 10,000 years ago, they were making this complicated stuff, and maybe even earlier because we can't date the megaliths with this Midden material. But at the lowest levels of the Midden material, we find Helwan points, which are also found right next to the Giza Plateau. And if we're discussing about the ability to carve the Sphinx,
they claim that they carved the T-pillars with flint tools.
Right.
So the Sphinx could have been carved at the same time.
Exactly. I'm trying to say, if the Helwan point maker people at Gobekli Tepe are supposed to have made those T-pillars.
Bingo. Okay. I'm on board with the PPNA built the Gobekli Tepe. They also carved the Sphinx.
I'm just saying, yes. Like, I still don't think those are the people that did it, but the connection is there.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? I'm trying to make the argument from the...
So in other words, like, we could also go that route where the PPNA found the megalithic site at Gobekli Tepe. They also found the Sphinx enclosure.
Exactly.
And that's why they were settled there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Lots of new things learned. Golly, it just,
But even, yes. So let's say that's what I think is probably that the Helwan point maker people were making those points at Gobekli Tepe and Karahan Tepe and the other Taj Tepe sites. Their points are also found and were actually first discovered and identified right off the Giza Plateau. And so
they're 12,000 years old.
Right. I'm just amazed that this connection isn't more well known.
I can't believe that it wasn't mentioned.
Right.
It was just, these are Helwan types.
Exactly.
I mean, I'm just looking at lithics. I didn't know that Helwan was in Giza.
We needed Yousef to tell us that. Yeah. That's what I'm saying. It's like Yousef is like, what? This is a small place and it's right next to where I live, right? But I'm just saying, it's like so the argument from people like Zahi Hawass that Gobekli Tepe has nothing to do with Giza is bullshit. Absolutely. The people who were making, who the standard model says built Gobekli Tepe, were also at Giza.
At the time that
Gobekli Tepe was being made,
yes.
And the points that they say were being made by the people that made Gobekli Tepe were being made here in Giza. Then, and if they could carve those T-pillars and stand them up and do all that shit, then why couldn't they make the Sphinx?
They absolutely could have.
From their perspective, I think that should be a good question.
It's a fantastic question. We'll make a video about it. Yeah. It's just, oh my God. I can't, for some reason, this place in Turkey has affected me more deeply than any of the other sites. Like,
you mean Gobekli Tepe?
Yeah. Well, the Taj Tepe civilization.
Okay, yeah.
I think initially it was because of my love of lithics. Like, I just love like arrowheads and flint tools. But upon stepping onto that site and seeing the Midden and the flint tools everywhere, and that's what led me into this, like, what's going on? What are these?
Yeah.
What are these? And finding out that they are the reason for the dating.
Yeah.
Initially, before the carbon dates ever arrived, and the whole basis for this idea of the people who built it.
Yeah.
Has just driven me insane. Like, I just want to dig into the literature more and more and more, because I can't reconcile these two things.
Yeah.
The crude nature, and I don't mean any disrespect for the people making these points. I could not make them. I'm going to try. I've seen now, like,
how they do it.
We went to the museum. And the museum had these cores, and there's these like strips down the cores where they were like, they'd hit, and they showed
one with a
boom. They flip it over, boom. They hit the other side, and they're knocking these like long single breaks with no shattering or anything. Just beautiful pieces, and they're curved. And then they would just barely work that. And that
Yeah.
was like, oh, knife.
Yeah.
You know, it's like the most crude thing that you would ever make, but at the same time, genius and beautiful.
Yeah.
But crude.
Yeah.
And then you look at like the vulture stone or the T-pillar in Enclosure C with the cat sticking off, or the puma
Yeah.
or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And you're just like, that person or that civilization was the extent of their tools. Like their tool making abilities were just like knocking a single piece off of a rock, and that's what they dealt with.
Yeah.
But then they would carve this
one
high
step
relief
removed
cat.
from just picking a rock up off the ground and banging on it. Yeah. It's like,
I've been arguing with myself, like maybe this is actually a more sophisticated, or at least mass producing, so like a different level of technology, because of the way
it takes less work.
It's so little work, but it's a very sophisticated setup.
Yeah.
Like they set up this core, and it's got to be a particular type of stone. It's got to have a certain purity level, and then they can just boom, knock 1, 2, 3, 4. They can make 1,000 points.
Yeah.
Because the guys are going out in the quarry and digging in limestone. So they're just making thousands and thousands of these points, and they're not working the edges. Fuck that.
Yeah.
Just haft it, give the guy a handle, and he's carving limestone. So I'm like, maybe this is actually a mass production level, minimal work possible, lithic. What's it doing in Giza?
Yeah. And everywhere else that's not the Taj Tepe.
What is it doing over there if they're not carving limestone with it?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
So this is part of myself arguing with myself about like, well, maybe this is more sophisticated in a different way.
Yeah.
But the strange thing is that alongside it, they don't also have the highly worked.
Yeah.
Like in the Egyptian culture, they have like every plane of the
Yeah.
crystal, like rock crystal or flint, like high grade flint. Every single plane has a long flake taken out in these beautiful ribbed.
Yeah, like it looks impossible. And then there's this beautiful, perfect pressure flaking done down the sides.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just like I don't see that at Gobekli Tepe, which when you see it in Egypt, it makes sense that like, of course they developed this amazing high artistic way of working this flint, because they were working other stones in such a magnificent way as well.
Yeah.
In Gobekli Tepe, you have magnificent work of stone, and then like almost none.
Yeah.
Like, it just doesn't make sense. I
And
can't
also
reconcile these
the
two
vast
things.
majority of the little figurines and stuff that they had in the museum were incredibly crude.
Scratched.
Yeah.
Yeah, just scratched.
It was like the people that were making those simple, not very technically, not a whole lot of technical ability necessary points. These just like knock a piece off the rock. Now it's sharp, good to go. We're living amongst the T-pillars and like, oh, wow, look at that cat. I want one also. And he can carve himself a cat. And it looks like shit, but it's the cat, right?
We have this same exact sort of contrast, however, in a much more subtle way with the vases.
Yeah.
In Egypt.
Yeah.
So you've got all these carvings and all this stuff and all of these vases. You've got different types of stone and everything. And then you have just this certain class of vase that just so happen to be like extremely old compared to everything else.
Yeah.
And they're ridiculous in their manufacture quality. And it doesn't line up with the other artifacts from that same time period.
Yeah.
In terms of technological advancement or technological ability, it's the exact same thing.
Yeah.
We're seeing at Gobekli Tepe. Just two things you
just don't normally associate with each other, right? It's just like, I'm sorry, but these don't match. Now, I mean, in our civilization, you have people making really high quality work and people making the same stuff in low quality, right? So in other words, these guys are really good at it. This guy's not that great. But
it's a building site. Like like you have number one, you have 1,000 years of evidence where the lithic technology doesn't hardly change at all.
That's right.
As it gets newer in the upper layers, the T-pillar quality goes
Down.
and the lithic quality goes up.
It goes up. Yeah.
They start working the point. They start working the tops. They start working around. They start flaking the flint in better patterns.
Yeah.
And you get almost the same thing. You've got this chunk of flint that they broke off, but now they've worked the base very well, bifacially.
Yeah.
Both sides. Then they've sharpened the point. But when you get to the oldest layers, like, they weren't doing that.
Well,
but the T-pillars are better?
Yeah. The way you just said that is perfect. The quality of the T-pillars goes down, but the quality of the lithics goes up.
Yeah.
The only way that makes sense is if they didn't build the original T-pillars.
They didn't make the T-pillars.
Yeah. They did make the later ones.
Yeah, I think so.
The little ones that are in the domiciles in layer
and you can see that they're hammered.
They're hammered.
Every face of those T-pillars are hammered.
Yeah. Another thing that was great was in that museum was walking around in the replica.
Oh man. Yeah.
Because I'm sorry, like now we've been to Gobekli Tepe 3 times. And you're on that flying walkway, the floating walkway above it beneath the big
shelter
that they've built. And it's great because you got, you can go up
shelter.
You can
destroying the site.
You can see everything. You can look down in, and you're not like, and they're bringing a million people through there a year, and they're not destroying the archaeological site, right? You're able to walk above it and see it, but you just can't.
You can't get the scale.
You can't get the scale. And then in the museum, you're like, oh my God, this T-pillar. You're just like, holy shit.
It's crazy.
I had to walk in there and stand in the circle.
It's amazing. They did a really good job
for enclosure D. And you're just like, holy shit. Like,
yeah.
Yeah. I just wish they also had C. I want to walk around and see as
Me
well.
too.
I want to look at those, but enclosure D is the most famous one.
Golly, I love what's going on over there too. It's just these new sites that they're excavating. They've surveyed and they have a plan. Like they're surveying. They're going everywhere and doing surveys. Like that's the number one thing. Is like we're gonna
find them all.
We're gonna survey and find them all. And bro, I found one. Now I doubt it has any T-pillars, but it's definitely a PP&A or PP&B.
Oh, you pointed to a
site.
Midden. Yeah, I remember this.
I went down there. It was that's what I love about it. It was at freaking Sagmatar.
Yeah.
And we went out to one of the far temples, and we're up there on the top of the ridge, and we're like looking over the edge, and I'm like looking down at there's a cliff.
There's like rock walls.
I'm like, there's rock walls,
And
like
Midden.
dilapidated rock walls, and that's Midden.
Yeah.
So I climb down there and I start, and I found points.
Yeah.
And I've been looking them up, and I'm pretty sure they're at least, maybe I found the base of a Byblos point, which is PP&B. So that's one of their sites. Like they were building, they knew about all of the other Taj Tepe sites because PP&B was like the next level. They were starting to build the domiciles around in these sites.
And that area where you were walking, way farther down in the valley, there was another big one.
You could see
could see walls and little squares and stuff. Yeah, you're right.
They
and that
probably
was way
know
behind,
about
like what's Temple of Saturn.
They probably know about it, but the temples were built there.
Yeah,
right. Like it was just like, oh, dude. So anyway, they're surveying all over the Taj Tepe, the stone hills out there, and then there's where Karahan is. It's a different name. It's a cool name. I can't remember it right now, but anyway, they're going out and surveying, and they're using satellite data. They're using all this stuff to try to just find like where are all the Neolithic settlements.
Yeah.
So originally, like for the past 50 years, it's been like, oh, well, we're finding these Neolithic settlements. They're down in the valleys. They're blah blah blah, and they're digging up, and they've identified PP&A, PP&B, the whole culture. No T-pillars, no megalithic work, nothing. Rock walls, plenty of them.
Yeah.
And then Gobekli Tepe is discovered and associated with these people, and now they found Karahan. And so now they're like, we got to survey everything. We got to find all the Neolithic settlements.
Yeah.
It would be like in Texas here, we've just got mounds everywhere, all near the rivers and stuff.
Yeah.
And there are some mound sites on hilltops above, cliffs above rivers and things like that. It would be like somebody just digging in a mound one day and finding a megalithic stone circle.
Yeah.
And then the entire archaeological community saying, we need to survey every single Neolithic site in Texas.
Yeah.
Just looking for mounds. Go to the mound, look for lithics. Okay, we got, this is probably Neolithic.
Yeah.
That's what's happening over there.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
And remember, we were going on those long drives in the bus through, I mean, just, we drove hundreds and hundreds of miles. And you're looking out, and many of the hills have a pile of
I know. Dude,
there's a green mound on top of that one, and that one, and that one.
I've got points on I've been looking through Google Maps while we were in the area, and I'm just like scrolling around and just like, oh, that one, dude. And I'm just putting points on the map because someday I'd like to go there and just hike.
Yeah.
Like, let's just hike over to this site. Now, the next, so they're surveying, they're doing this broad scale surveying just Neolithic, just to find the sites.
Yeah.
Then they'll do like a systematic, they'll send various teams out to say, okay, you can just like dig a hole.
Yeah.
Right. Like just test pit, dig a trench, whatever.
Yeah.
And
you'll find cobblestones, or you're finding like signs of actual work stone. Yeah.
This is epic because I can see in like the next 5 years or whatever, 10 years, when you go to Turkey, you're not just going to Gobekli Tepe and then to Karahan Tepe. Well, this time we had Cyberg.
Mm-hmm.
We had Çakmak Tepe.
Yeah, I'm glad you can remember these names.
Legit. Çakmak Tepe was freaking insane. Like there was no T-pillars, but they were cutting bedrock.
Yeah. Cutting bedrock out.
No T-pillars, but they're literally carving the bedrock out and putting carvings in the walls.
Yeah.
So it's like the T-pillars are later. The bedrock carving is first.
Yeah. Then it's
what?
Yeah.
Or the T-pillars were moved from Çakmak.
Yeah.
To Gobekli.
Because it's in the middle of a village.
I mean, Cyberg was. Cyberg was the one that was in the village.
Mm.
Çakmak Tepe was the one we went up on the hill. There was just nothing.
And
the wind was blowing like
that's
crazy.
Right. I remember. Yeah. Okay.
And there was like it was like we're just walking. But as soon as you step out of the car, it's just like all over the ground are the lithics.
Lithics everywhere. I remember that. Yeah.
And then we go down there, and they had it all covered up. They had a couple of like little spots that they had excavated. And it was all covered. But Ramazan showed me the videos of what they had covered, and it was bedrock cut.
Yeah, that's
with
right.
a bench,
Big
and
circles.
they carved into the bench.
Yeah,
the Lion's Gate and what other stuff? I don't know what I'll have to. I don't remember what they had carved into it, but so they're doing these excavations all over the place. So I'm saying in like 5 years from now, we'll be hitting multiple sites and going and looking, and like this is going to give us this broad overview of what is really like. It's just Cyberg and Çakmak were like an addition to this whole thing. It's like, what is going on?
Yeah.
What are they doing? It's all on the tops of hills.
Yep.
Or up high in the bed, cut into bedrock. Like, I don't know. It's just wild. I love it. Absolutely love it. I'm fascinated by it.
Cyberg was the one that became a Roman bath later. Isn't that right? Didn't he say there was Roman stuff there?
I don't remember. Cyberg was, I don't know.
That was the one in the village.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that first one where there's bedrock cuts.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, yes. The Romans had cut into it. Yes. I remember seeing those Roman cuts in the bedrock. And then just right 20 feet away was a rock cut bench.
Yeah.
That had the Lion's Gate.
Yeah. The Romans used it, and there was like a Neolithic settlement there, and the Neoliths people were, because we found their same points, right? Those same the Byblos, and the older ones.
Yeah.
What are the older ones? They're really simple.
I'll have to look them
anyway, we found those laying on the ground all over this site. It was basically somebody's backyard. The woman came over. Remember when we were there? She came over and started complaining that they took her house away from her. She's telling Ramazan that they took her house, right? But anyway, I guess the Neolithic people lived there, and then there were villagers there. Then Romans lived there for a while too, and they used it for their own purposes because it was like right in the. It was not very far away from the town. It was not very far away from Şanlıurfa. I believe that Şanlıurfa itself, that whole valley, was probably full of this stuff. It's just gone.
Yep.
It's just gone because people have been living there nonstop.
That's the other thing.
But remember,
there are pauses on the hilltops. There are other valley tepe sites.
Remember,
but they wouldn't be paused.
Some of those little village houses near is it Cyberg? Okay, now he's reading on his phone.
No, I don't know what the village houses near. I don't know. What are you talking about?
No, that's the name of the place that was in the village.
Yes, Cyberg. With the cow over there, and then we're like,
they had doorways made out of T-pillar stones.
Yes, and there are little walls that they had built around it for their farm. Like, were just full of basalt chunks from like grinding stones and stuff, and they were just part of this. That's the other thing. This idea of the ceremonial work feasts and stuff like that. No. But yes, feasts.
Mm.
Yes, like ceremonial feasts.
Yeah.
But maybe perhaps to do work like for reconstruction and stuff like that. But I think part of the reason why Gobekli Tepe and Karahan, for example, have such a huge midden and a lot of, like there's such a large tell is because of the quality of the megaliths at the bottom.
Yeah.
Now, Cyberg barely has any midden on it. But it still, I think, was the same type of thing that they had found and they had venerated, but they didn't live there.
Yeah.
Or maybe they did. We haven't seen a whole lot of excavations, but it was clear that it wasn't like a super deep midden.
Yeah.
But there is this bedrock cutting and stuff. So there was something going on there. And of course, they visited and venerated the site and probably made pilgrimages there.
Yeah.
And probably had feasts there. Whereas Gobekli Tepe had like these incredible monuments. And so that would have been like the primo site. That was the freaking Vatican.
Yeah.
And they were having huge, like
it was their Mecca.
It was their Mecca.
Yeah.
And so you have this massive accumulation of midden on top of like multiple excavations and reconstructions of the site.
Yeah.
As the midden accumulates from the feasts and stuff, because these people, like all Neolithic cultures that I know about, do this same thing. They just live on their refuse.
Yeah.
And it just grows and grows and grows. In the case of these simple midden mounds here, they say that they're donut shaped because they kept digging out the middle.
Yeah.
To build fires and then bury food.
Yeah.
And steam it or whatever, and then dig it up the next day. And it's just like this big process of over and over and over. So you can imagine that, like, well, if I excavated in the center of this donut-shaped, pristine midden mound in Texas, I would find inverted layers of midden because they were digging that shit out and throwing it on the ground and then reburying it.
Yeah. Intentional reburial.
Yeah. So I think this is just so fascinating to me, and it's the connections to Egypt and like I don't know.
The point that I was making about the little village houses near that site, they had megaliths as lintel stones and door, like what do you call it when it's along the bottom, like the doorstop, the step. And Yousef was going around
threshold.
The threshold. Yousef was going around pointing it out. Look, this guy's house, that dude's house, this wall over here. They've got chunks of megalithic stonework in their houses. And I'm just saying, it's like, this is why it's harder to find them in places where people still live. Whereas on the hill where Gobekli Tepe is, no one was using those stones to make a house out of because nobody lived up there.
Sorry, say that again. I had to type.
The villagers in this area around Cyberg were using fragments of the megaliths in their houses. Gobekli Tepe, there's no one lived up there.
Right.
Not in modern times. So now the places that are closer to places like Shanlurfa, there may have been beautiful megaliths. It's just scattered. It's gone. It's been used.
I see your point. Yeah, I get the point you're making.
Yeah, I think that Shanlurfa it just seems like an obvious place to live, right?
The castle up there on that rock probably had a freaking Tepe on it, bro. Or
they're doing archaeology up there, like they're digging. I think they've found something inside those castle walls beneath all the rubble of the castle parts.
Yeah, the castle is built up on top of like this midden. Like they start digging down in that and they find T-pillars.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, I can totally see that because that would be the perfect spot, right? Like you're up above the river.
Yeah, I flew the drone over the castle. I got to look down at the wall.
That's cool. That's cool.
Yeah. By the way, this episode was like pure Snake Bros conversation. Next one, I'll bring footage, pictures, video
because I want to do show prep. Damn.
I just want to. Well, I was gonna say because like we're over time here. We got to talk about cart ruts, but I want to show pictures and footage, and so next time. This time we were just talking.
You know what, Grok 3? You need to really dig into actual lithic types because you obviously don't know what I'm talking about. I even gave you a couple of names and you're just like, oh yeah, he'll want Byblos and a swad. I just said that.
Kyle's developing a relationship with Grok.
Put it on trash talk mode. Fuck you. Anyways, yeah, fascinating trip.
Yeah,
it was.
There's much more to talk about too. We covered some of the, we kind of ran around on the topics, Egypt to Turkey and back.
The connections between them are quite interesting and compelling as well. Though.
Yeah, like undeniable. Like Helwan, dude, come on.
Yeah.
The Lion's Gate, you got 2 sphinxes and a pedestal, and and then all throughout Mesopotamia, this same symbolism is used.
It's so cool.
I
think we learned a lot on this.
They're telling
trip.
an old story in a new way.
Yes, exactly. Telling the old story in a new way, and it's so good, so good.
All right, well, let's wrap it up.
What else do we got? We should probably thank Patreon people. And thank all of the supporters, whether you're on Patreon or you just donate to the show on the pyramid scheme through PayPal or whatever you do. I see them coming in, and it's amazing. Thank you all so much.
Yeah. Everybody who's been supporting us, thank you all, really.
And all the attendees on the trips. It's we saw a lot of,
returning familiar faces and new ones. And just like people are coming and then, they're also like value for value while we're there.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is amazing,
bro.
Just like, dude, you are doing the value.
You already
are
to come on the trip.
Yes.
Then you just gave us a massive tip, and it's like, oh my gosh, you people are amazing, and we thank you so much. And it's humbling and awesome, and it's a pleasure to be able to do all of this. And just a huge thanks to everybody, all the listeners, all the engagement, all the financial support.
To Yousef, Ramazan, Mo, Bishoy,
my bro,
the Cairo team and the Luxor team. You guys are all just super awesome. And what else? Peru. We have trips to Peru. You guys
2 trips.
Come. Yeah, 2 trips now because the first one's full.
There might be a spot open because some people, when we opened the second one, they were like, "Oh, let me go to the second one," and it's like, so we made.
So anyway, in the show notes, I'm going to put links to where you can go to sign up for going with us in Peru. We're going to Peru in October 2025. Me, Kyle, Ben, and Yousef. It's going to be great.
God dang. Yeah. We jammed out so much. It was so fun. We're getting better as a band.
We are.
We get to jam together once a year for like a few weeks.
Yeah.
But this time we had 7 weeks to kind of work it out. And
Yousef and the Pyramidians.
It's Yousef and the Pyramidians. It's like this, we're trying to like merge the sort of like southern bluesy
Yeah,
rock
can
and
we,
roll
like-
with like Egyptian
can we
traditional
merge the bluesy stuff with the desert music? And
we're trying to
yeah,
make
it's
no. It's traditional Egyptian. We're trying to make desert music
okay.
out of this merging of these two styles, and it's fantastic. I've thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah.
So we'll be doing
So
more
it's
of
like
that.
Southern Egyptian desert blues.
Yeah, exactly. Dude. That's exactly what it is. It's epic. I can see some great potential coming out of this.
Yeah.
So we'll be doing that in Peru. If we can breathe, we'll sing. And then
That's
I'm not
going to
sure
be
we're
tough. Woo!
Can you imagine?
Yeah.
I'm trying to.
I'm gonna laugh at Yousef trying to play his flute. You can't breathe, bro.
Come on, play something, flute man. Okay, moving on. Flute man. Flute man. All right, folks. We love you.
Always have.
Always will.
Good night, Adamu.
Get back to work.